founder of Sustainable Fisheries Partnership. He has worked on fisheries, forestry, and conservation issues in Asia, Europe, and Americas, and he edited the United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization's World Review of Marine Fisheries. He has been in the technical advisory board of the MSC, studied at Cambridge University, and was named Intrafish Person of the Year. Thanks, Jim, for your talk, and welcome.
Oh, thank you very much for the invitation to speak. I hope all of you are surviving the pandemic okay. For me, I've discovered that I have curly hair. So for those of you who don't recognize me, I look a bit different from normal. So thanks for laughing, Chitlali. That's great. Yeah, there you go. I've enjoyed the session so far. I really have. Many interesting panels and sessions coming up this afternoon and tomorrow as well, with examples of fisheries improvement projects, discussions around how to help small-scale fisheries move towards sustainability, a future of aquaculture in Latin America, social standards, information systems available to producers and buyers, issues around eco-labeling and traceability. I urge you all to attend. My comments today are really focused on something a bit very important to all of that, but very specific, is on how Latin American governments are doing managing their fisheries. And very specifically, how are we, the NGOs and seafood markets and supply chains working on fisheries improvement projects? How are we doing in encouraging governments to improve their performance? I will talk about some successes, which show what can be done, and I hope will give everyone some hope. But I'm also going to note that all Latin American governments continue to really woefully underinvest in fisheries management and ocean conservation. That includes their well-known industrial fish stocks, and in some cases, which I'll talk about a bit later on, the knowledge, the level of science, the capacity is good, but less money is available for things like fisheries independent surveys. And we actually are in a situation for quite a few of these fisheries where that data is actually worse now than it was 20 years ago. I'm also going to note that no Latin American country has a comprehensive governance system to enable effective co-management of small-scale fisheries. Again, there are examples of success despite that lack of a comprehensive governance system. But the concern for me is that there hasn't been any discernible progress on this issue by most of the governments in Latin America. And that really needs to serve as a wake-up call to buyers and suppliers and the NGOs in this space, because that holds true despite almost 15 years of efforts by fisheries improvement projects that are specifically on small-scale fisheries or include significant artisanal fisheries components. So I know that sounds a bit depressing. It's always a challenge to sort of articulate and explain that things are okay, but need to be better, because people who think things are awful hear you say it's okay. They're like, oh, you're an apologist. And people who are looking at the evidence say things are okay. So someone is being too alarmist when they say how awful things are still. So my aim is to really invigorate you and give purpose, encouragement. As I talk, I hope to persuade industry and NGOs listening that if they can get better organized and work together more, then they can succeed in engaging governments, and governments can deliver these critical improvements. But, you know, a cold shower in the morning is also invigorating, but sometimes it's a bit uncomfortable. So let's get started with that. But just before I dive in, you know, for those of you who are good at hearing accents, you'll hear that I have a bit of a Scottish accent. So I will say, desculpe-me, eu falo pouco em português, mas eu não hablo espanhol. I'd love to speak more languages, but growing up in Scotland, I used all of my brain's extremely limited language capacity simply trying to understand the Scottish accent. And I think it's a legitimate question why a Scotsman who doesn't speak your languages is talking about how far sustainable fisheries have come in your countries. So let me sort of give you a bit of background and how I've ended up here today. I started out as a mathematical modeler in ecology. And my first field work, which makes me feel old, was 30 years ago in the tropical rainforests of Venezuela. For those of you paying attention, you'll have noticed I said forests, not oceans. And I spent 3 months crawling around the forest. I got my data, but I also caught a wide variety of interesting diseases. I got eaten by a wide variety of interesting insects. And after 3 months, I was pretty sick, and I was pretty sick of the forest. And since I had enough data for my degree, I went to visit a friend who happened to be running Morocoy National Park in the Caribbean Sea in Venezuela. And we were sitting on the beach, drinking a beer, and I was explaining what I had learned in my research about the connection between how disturbed an ecosystem is and how diverse it is. And as I scratched my insect bites and complained about how hard it was to do research in tropical forests, my friend, and this is the way my friends speak to me, so you draw your own conclusions, he asked me why I was so stupid and pointed out I could have studied the same question while diving the beautiful coral reefs of the Morocoy Park and sleeping in a hammock round the back of the bar. So I thought he made a pretty good point, and I got home from that trip and I switched from forestry to fisheries and marine ecology. So I think it's fair to say that my career in fisheries started 30 years ago in a beach bar in Venezuela. I'd like to say it was all roses after that, but my first job as a marine ecologist was collecting stomach samples from monkfish on the deck of a Scottish trawler during a freezing winter storm. And I realized I had made a terrible career mistake and wished I was back in the Venezuelan rainforest, but it was too late. I had been bitten by the fisheries bug. I was very lucky to land a contract that Chitlali mentioned, editing the UN FAO World Review of Marine Fisheries in the mid-1990s. And that's when I first started to learn really about Latin American fisheries. Trying to write that report meant that I talked to a lot of experts in Latin American fisheries and got their perspectives on what was happening in those fisheries. And I really learned a lot from those people, many of whom are still with us, luckily. Including my boss at the time, Jorge Cerque, who was, of course, a giant amongst the Anchoveta community for the work he did with MRP and then with FAO for many years. But my work in person with fisheries in Latin America was started with the Mexican Gulf of California industrial shrimp fishery, which I started working with in 1998 with my good friend Juan Manuel Garcia Codillo. And over the past 20 years, I've supported the work of Mexican colleagues in that fishery and others in Mexico, tackling overcapacity, bycatch reduction devices, TEDs and TED use, IUU issues, government research capacity and funding. And it's been a terrific journey. Along the way, in 2002, I started advising McDonald's, who were concerned about the status of their whitefish stocks worldwide. And that led to the first fisheries improvement project that, as we define them today, that included international suppliers, starting in 2002. And in 2004, working with Walmart, things expanded very quickly once they made their commitment in 2006. And to meet that growing industry demand, we created the Sustainable Fisheries Partnership. And that led to a lot more work with South American fisheries. The first fisheries I worked on in South America were Chilean hake and Chilean hoki with Seda Pesca, a very cool and productive local NGO that I've worked with for many years, providing local technical support and advice. Both FIPs made some progress, but ultimately failed in their first iteration. We learned a lot from these early FIPs. We really tested the model. We started a lot of projects that we were like, oh, it's going to be interesting to see if this works or not, but let's see. And the hoki fishery moved south. The fish moved south. More of it became caught by companies supplying fish meal instead of the frozen block market. The product wasn't available to McDonald's in their supply chain. Their interest, the local fishing companies, obviously, their interest declined and the FIP withered. Chilean common hake, sold in the US as Chilean whiting. Back then, it was in a very bad condition. It failed to adopt a recovery plan for many years, in large part due to conflict between the industrial and artisanal sectors. A new FIP was launched in 2012. The situation is more encouraging now. with fishing mortality reported below target levels, and the stock slowly increasing in size. I see Ernesto pointing out it is still alive, but I agree. That's what I've just said. There is a FIP up and running and doing well. Between 2008 and 2010, we continued to work with Pesca in particular to launch quite a few more fisheries improvement projects in Latin America. I'm sorry, I'm going too fast. Thank you, Chitlali. With a view to testing the FIP concept and seeing what worked. This included FIPs in Peru, Argentina, Brazil, Guyana, and Panama on whitefish, small pelagics, and other species. Other organizations got other fisheries improvement projects going, including WWF on mahi and lobster. In 2010, SFP asked local industry to formally lead fisheries improvement projects, directly hire local technical resources, and consult with local NGOs. And we did this for a few reasons. First, because we knew genuine industry leadership, genuine local industry leadership was critical if the FIPs were to successfully engage governments. Governments need to hear the demand for fisheries management from stakeholders they care about in terms they understand. And that's economic development, social stability, votes, and export earnings. And those arguments are best made by the CEOs of fishing companies, processing companies, and the leaders of fishers associations, and definitely not American or European buyers or NGOs. Chitlali, can I ask if that speed is okay, or do you want me to slow down a bit more?
Oh, no, thank you very much. It's that the translators are having a really bad, they were having a bad time, but you're okay now.
They're okay now. Right. Well, if I go too fast, just shut me down. I'll slow down.
Don't mean to to get back your inspiration.
Okay, so we know that genuine local industry leadership is critical for that reason. But we also believe it's critical because it identifies and secures local funding that can persist for years, and years are often needed to deliver the results. I've seen too many good projects fail because external donors or NGOs lost interest. And history shows that that happens quite regularly. The third reason for promoting local industry leadership is that the stakeholders in the fishery and the experts closest to a fishery are best placed to identify the viable solutions that will work in their local setting with the resources available to them. To outsiders trying to help, please do help, please come, please provide your support, but make sure that your solutions and your ideas are fit for purpose, meaning they're actually realistic and feasible for the fisheries to implement with the resources they have. So local industry leadership of FIPS is now the norm, and that, I think, has been a very big step forward. But also around a decade ago, we realized that even successfully run large FIPS with local industry leadership were not consistently succeeding in engaging governments. Many had good successes, but most didn't succeed on everything, and a few failed to engage governments at all. And so we developed the idea of a national platform, this idea of bringing FIPS and other fisheries together to align on engaging governments on issues of common concern. It took a while to get our first funding for this, which came from the Global Environment Facility together with the UNDP. But that project has been going now for a few years, and it's generated progress in Ecuador in particular, and Costa Rica. And in the last few years, with support and leadership from the Walton Family Foundation, similar efforts are underway in Mexico, Peru, and Chile. In 2017, SFP worked with our partners to launch something called Target 75. And the intent of Target 75 was to work with industry to agree a common list of priority fisheries that they would focus on. And for the last few years, the main effort of Target 75 has been to get more industry engaged and get more fisheries improvement projects started that are large in scale and delivering government engagement. There are currently over 50 FIPs publicly reporting from Latin America. Around about half are in Mexico, some in Central America, and the rest in South America, which is up from just 25 years ago. So that is very encouraging and good progress. And now, obviously, we're all working to make sure those FIPs succeed. So that's who I am and how I come to be speaking about how far the movement for fishery sustainability has come in Latin America. I want to pivot now to ask three big questions about three big topics. So the three big questions are the same for each topic. What are we trying to achieve? Question number one. What have we achieved to date? Question number two. And question number three, are we going to succeed by carrying on what we're doing now, or do we need to change and add new approaches? So those are the three big questions. And I'm going to ask those questions of, number one, modern fisheries management of industrial fisheries. Number two, co-management of small-scale fisheries. And number three, how industry and civil society is currently organized to drive improvements on both industrial and small-scale fisheries. So let me start with looking at modern fisheries management of target stocks in industrial fisheries. And the main aim is to eliminate IUU, to bring good science, high quality fisheries independent data, is feeding stock assessments that are done transparently with stakeholder participation. And that good science is then followed in a transparent and fair quota and other regulatory setting process. That's the answer to what we're trying to achieve. And we heard quite a bit about that from Ray yesterday. What have we achieved to date on that? Well, it's good. There are good scientists, good scientific capacity and research institutions in most Latin American countries. And that history dates back many decades. Over the years, I've had the pleasure of visiting INP in Ecuador, pesca in Mexico, INIDEP in Argentina, IFOP in Chile, IMARPE in Peru. And good work is happening in all of those institutions. But, there is a but, it's happening too often with too little transparency and participation. But more importantly, and affecting all these institutions, is low, insufficient, and unstable central government funding. And in recent decades, we've actually seen only one or two major stocks are assessed regularly. And even those, in many countries, have suffered from a decline in survey quality and hence stock assessment quality and even stock assessment frequency. When I started my work in Mexico on that industrial shrimp fishery, we were looking at good stock assessment results coming out fairly frequently. I believe it's been over a decade now since we've seen something of that quality emerge out of the Mexican system there. And again, the fault does not lie with the scientists. These are people working for very little money in many cases with very little resources, and they're doing the best they can. They need to be better resourced. There have been some successes. I'll talk a little bit later about in Ecuador. The small pelagics FIP there has got money from industry into the survey work, and there are other examples. But in almost all of these examples, they are actually a band-aid. a temporary repair, a response to a wider deterioration of funding by governments of modern fisheries management. Even the small funding still available is precarious. It moves around. It can decline drastically depending on which political party is in power. And that in itself can change very rapidly. So, the third question is, what will we succeed by carrying on what we're doing now? And you can see that my answer is no. We need more money. We need it to be reliable, meaning protected as much as possible from the winds of change that affect national government expenditures and their plans. And that means that all fisheries, FIPS, MSC certified, industrial, artisanal, need to come together in each country to figure out sensible, and I say sensible because these are tricky things to do, but sensible cost recovery approaches that can secure adequate, stable, long-term funding for modern fisheries management. And these arrangements and laws need to get written into the legislation. My point to industry right now is you are, in many cases, not all, but in many cases, you are fighting for crumbs from a small pie. And the real challenge is, how do you make that pie, the amount of money available for fisheries science and management, how do you make that pie 10 times bigger is what I think people should be focused on. The second issue is effective co-management of small-scale fisheries. What are we trying to achieve? Well, we want national level laws that have created a flexible, practical governance framework that recognizes and empowers small-scale fishers to collaborate with government to deliver effective co-management of their fisheries. And obviously that covers local data collection, local analysis, local regulatory design, and local enforcement. We all know why we need co-management. These fisheries cannot be effectively managed any other way. They are too complicated, too dispersed, and often too small for a central government fisheries management system to succeed. What have we achieved to date? Unfortunately, and this is not an issue just for Latin America, I would say I'm not aware of a single country, even those with considered to be exceptionally good fisheries management systems. I'm not aware of any country that has a really solid national governance structure in place for small-scale fisheries, except maybe Galicia in Spain, if you count that as a country, which obviously Galicians do. So that's a really shining beacon of hope, but it's not New Zealand has problems with inshore fisheries. Europe has terrible problems with inshore fisheries. The United States has terrible problems with inshore fisheries. Some communities and fishers have succeeded in managing their fisheries and co-management in some countries, but that's often in spite of national legislation rather than because of it. In too many countries, in particular in Latin America, huge swaths of the artisanal sector aren't even counted and legally recognized in fisheries management, never mind actually being involved in the co-management systems. And I think we all know, and we'll hear more, that this is incredibly important for the fishers, for the environment, and for food supply. We're talking about 2 million people. We're talking about a third of total landings, but over 50% of value. We're talking about the fisheries that supply the majority of seafood eaten in Latin America. It's critical to local food security. So what do we have to do to succeed? I mean, clearly we're going to have to do something different. And I think there are at least 4 things we need to do in addition to our existing model. First, as with industrial fisheries, we need to bring small-scale fisheries together to engage regulators and get a good national governance framework in place. These efforts need to align with work that's already underway, organized around UN FAO principles and the like, supported by different development agencies. Third, and back to the community level, we need to help individual fisher communities get organized, get legally recognized, and build their capacity to participate and deliver effective co-management. And fourth, from a supply chain perspective, we need to make sure buyers and their suppliers are supporting and helping small-scale fishers get organized and empowered, and not undermining them through, frankly, shady business dealings and trying to cheat people on price and spec and things like that. The third topic was building the institutions within the sustainable seafood movement that are needed to create political will and drive improvement for decades. What are we trying to do? Well, we want entities that are formally organized, that have legal status, have a business plan, and have stable long-term income to support their operations. Some good examples of well-organized entities exist, whether in a FIP or another structure. But too often, the improvement efforts that are underway today are here today and gone tomorrow. Too many FIPs are too small and not sufficiently engaged with governments. Too many, I think, have failed to really take our advice on board. And I'll be very specific about this. This has been a constant refrain and almost a demand from the Sustainable Fisheries Partnership since the very beginning, which is of every FIP, including those we were running at the time, show me the policy impact. Show me the policy impact. Until you show me that policy impact, I don't know, and neither do any of your customers know, whether that FIP is actually able to engage government and get government to respond. You can only judge that by success. So what do we need to do that's differently? And I've got a few minutes, so I'll just wrap up. There are three big changes. First, we really do need to organize, recognizing this is going to be a long-term project. It's going to take decades to solve existing problems, never mind deal with new ones like climate change. Everyone involved needs to stop thinking this is a one-time battle or a short-term campaign. We're talking about changing behavior of several industry, local fishers, governments. We're talking about changing behavior for life. And so far, we've picked up a few good habits thanks to all the hard work of those who came before us, but we still have a lot of bad habits of our own that we, the current generation, are responsible for fixing. So it's a long-term project. Let's build for that. Second and related is really back to a point I made before: invest in organizing and empowering local stakeholders. That includes local NGOs, fishers organizations, local industry. To international NGOs, I have a simple message: stop running your own field programs and operate through local NGOs. To buyers in the United States and Europe, get proactive in engaging your suppliers and asking them to cultivate and empower local producers. We have to be ruthless about promoting local leadership. The third message is to those local leaders: you need to compromise where you can in order to have influence and make progress. Industry and NGOs love to ding each other. Apart, you are weak. Together, you are stronger. Find areas you can agree on, like more resources for fisheries science, and approach government on that. Of course, we're going to still fight. It's inevitable. But we can fight on one side while agreeing to work together on another. I'd like to close by saying, all of this is possible. It's going to take a lot of us working together for a long time. So please don't get frustrated. Keep that long-term perspective, recognize the successes to date, be fair in recognizing those successes, but also be fair in recognizing what remains to be done, and do not allow old rivalries to prevent new collaborations. I'd leave it there. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jim. If somebody has any questions or whatever, could you answer by the platform? Or if you don't have any time, we can select them all and mail you with all the results. Sure. Is that okay for you? Yep. Because people yep. are organizing for the next panels that are 6 simultaneous. Your talk was really good and inspiring, and also challenging.
Well, that like a cold shower. I did warn you.
Okay. And thank you very much, Arlen. Thank you too. Thank you well, if you can stay or whatever, and we'll be in touch.
Okay.
I think I'm getting more and more worried with all the challenges we have right now.